Hello and welcome to today's episode of Bond Air. My name is Jesse Longo. I'm your host, Associate Director of Nursing here at Bond. So excited to be back in the studio recording. We're in our offices, support center offices in Chelsea, and I am so excited for today's episode. We have a very special guest with us who's going to be talking about a subject that is quite near and dear to a lot of us as veterinary professionals. Melyssa Allen is from Veterinary Wellbeing Buddy. She's a double board certified lifestyle medicine professional and health and wellness coach who's dedicated her career to helping veterinary professionals lead healthier lives, both mentally and physically. With a background that started in animal training and evolved into coaching healthcare professionals during the COVID-19 pandemic, Melyssa saw firsthand the immense dedication and the unique challenges faced by those in the veterinary field. Her experiences led her to develop comprehensive well-being solutions specifically designed to support veterinary teams and organizations addressing the mental health and burnout issues that are all too common in our profession. In this episode, we're going to explore Melyssa's personal journey and how lifestyle medicine and well-being coaching can transform teams and the future of veterinary or mental health support in our industry. Whether you're a vet, a technician, a care coordinator, any part of the veterinary organization in our teams, this conversation is definitely going to help provide some valuable insights into fostering your well-being for yourself. So thank you, Melyssa.
Woo-hoo!
How you doing?
I'm so excited to be here, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in. I'm stoked to have you in here. We've been hosting you throughout the month in our clinics virtually through an awesome seminar series that you've been hosting. So I'm happy to have you here in person. We have a lot of fun topics to discuss today, but I think I want to get started. You have such an interesting journey and kind of like what brought you into veterinary medicine. And I love seeing kind of like human mental health professionals kind of get more interested in our field, as it is something that is so important. So I would love to kind of hear, like what inspired that transition and how has it been so far?
Yeah, I mean, I always think like, where should I start with this? Because obviously as a kid, I was an animal lover. First time I ever went to SeaWorld San Antonio with my parents, I was 4 years old. I like touched a dolphin for the first time. I was like, I'm going to be an animal trainer someday. And one of those weird people who actually like did it.
Yeah.
And during my time in college, I was involved in all the cool animal opportunities that Pre-Vet Society had. So I connected with a lot of people who were on the VetMed career track and stayed in touch with them, obviously, because, you know, they're animal people too. We all just tend to get along very easily. And so as I was an animal trainer for a few years, obviously working alongside lots of vet pros, I kind of transitioned because I jokingly say I went from training animals to training humans because I was looking for the next challenge. And I had done everything in animal training that I had aspired to. And so I was like, how can I use kind of my knowledge on behavior modification in a way to help people? So I went and got my master's in clinical psychology and was originally starting down the licensed mental health counselor route. But as it happened in grad school, I fell in love with fitness and I started teaching group exercise classes, which led me to the realm of health and wellness coaching and lifestyle medicine and all of that coming together. And my first kind of big girl job after my master's was working at a hospital on a human well-being team, human healthcare well-being team. And it was during COVID. So obviously there was lots of emphasis on resilience strategies, burnout prevention, self-care, you know, everything that is so important, but especially during that time.
Absolutely.
It's like, what is the smallest thing that you can focus on to support yourself in this moment that you have control over? And it was interesting because during that time, there was just this discrepancy that I saw between the way that human healthcare providers were being acknowledged and supported and appreciated for their dedication, obviously. But on the flip side of that, all of my friends in VetMed were like, hey, we're over here struggling too. No one is paying us any attention. If anything, people are more hostile than ever.
Yeah.
So it really shined a light on the fact that there were so many limited resources available. Whereas when I'm coaching doctors and nurses, I can do a quick Google search and there's so many resilience and well-being toolkits that show up. And there wasn't that same plethora of resources available in VetMed. So that's really where I wanted to transition over and help kind of beef up the space a little bit.
I love that. I love as somebody that kind of does a lot of resource gathering for our teams, I think especially you're pulling something up and if it's even if it's like the simplest directions, if it doesn't feel like it's directed towards you, or you can like kind of see yourself in the image that's being kind of played out of like this, whatever the kind of structure is or program, then you do kind of feel a little bit left out in it. And I certainly, as before we started recording, I was kind of talking about my journey as a technician and working in many different types of environments. I think it's some of those inevitable feelings that kind of stress and burnout come with the territory that we're in, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we just have to kind of sit there and take it in a way. There's so much that we can do. And I think like you brought up even just now control. I think that like that idea of what you can control is so important. Realizing that like that power that you have to be able to kind of like, I know, and do the things that kind of help change your perspective.
Yeah, when I'm in those moments where, because I spiral myself too, right? You know, we're all humans. Yeah, exactly. In those moments where I need to refocus, I actually have this little physical thing that I do now where I like throw my arms up in ballet arms. And I'm like, what is within Melyssa's bubble of control right here that can help her account for everything that is outside of bubble of control? So I'll just like do that at my desk sometimes. And my fiance is like, oh, she's having a moment. Like,
oh, so good. Yeah, I mean, it's something that I especially I think I spend a lot of time training our new leaders as our technician leaders at the organization, as like anybody getting into a leadership position for the first time really needs a lot of support and coaching when you have, all of a sudden a ton of different responsibilities, and now you're dealing with kind of like not only kind of the stress of being a veterinary professional, but also kind of helping manage and coach folks through things. And I that control piece is always what's important. It's just like, what can we control? How can we kind of like troubleshoot issues without kind of taking too much on ourselves, which is like kind of like always at the focal point of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of that comes down to like, it is a way that we can help ourselves cope with everything that is outside of our control, because from a burnout perspective, like we could love our job, we could be doing everything to take care of ourselves, and we could still get burnt out because it's such a multifaceted and complex issue. Like there's so many factors that contribute to developing burnout. But even knowing that there are things that we can do to help buffer those impacts helps people feel a little bit more empowered and takes their focus away from everything that is frustrating them and riling them up about like, oh, I wish it wasn't like this. And I mean, of course we wish that we could change things. And some of those things, there's progress being made in kind of, helping to resolve some of the contributors that have been part of this burnout epidemic that we're facing in VetMed. So it's hopeful to see those positive changes happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for a long time in my career in VetMed, talking about like team wellness and burnout really like became just kind of like a buzzy topic during conferences. And then you would go actually like into a clinic, or I would go back to my clinics and be like, okay, I learned all this great stuff, but like kind of either you feel so helpless in that part of the organization as like an individual contributor or a technician on the floor, an assistant. But I think as the industry has started to hear more and more of kind of the voices of the veterinary teams to be able to kind of like help support. I mean, Bond in many ways was created like for those exact reasons. I remember kind of like deciding on where I wanted to take my next step in the career. I came to that point where a lot of technicians do come, where it's like, do I want to keep doing this? But I love, the field and what I did so much, what I do so much, that I didn't want to leave. And being able, and like, I remember seeing the job ad for Bond for the first time and being like, this is like too good. Like, it's like the fact that they're, highlighting like what we do for technicians, what we do for doctors, and kind of having that kind of clinical voice so present and prevalent. It's amazing to see the industry continue to kind of take shape and take lead in that charge, and kind of seeing that, it only really changes, like nothing changes if nothing changes. And this is like, it's been fun to see kind of the expansion of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what's that phrase? I think it's something along the lines of the most dangerous phrase in the human language is this is the way we've always done things. And it's like, no, we have to be innovative. We can come up with creative solutions to these problems and not let history keep repeating itself.
Absolutely. You mentioned, so I'll get right into it, because you did mention, there are kind of like methods to kind of like helping teams kind of cope with burnout or cope with, the compassion fatigue that they feel. What are some of those kind of like big, like kind of even like ranging from, more time consuming to just like little things that they can do to kind of prevent or mitigate kind of that burnout within the teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start off with kind of like a foundation where we were mentioning lifestyle medicine, and that's my training. But a lot of people might not be familiar with that term. It's basically using our lifestyle as a therapeutic intervention in our lives. So it focuses on 6 main health behaviors. So we have physical activity, nutrition, stress management, healthy sleep, positive social connections, and then reducing or eliminating risky substance use. So things like tobacco, vaping, alcohol. And those 6 pillars can be used on a more intensive kind of therapeutic level. So that's where my training comes in. And there's lots of research coming out on how physicians who practice lifestyle medicine are much more well equipped to have the resilience to buffer the effects of burnout. So it's interesting because there's actually this reciprocal kind of reinforcing effect that happens between positive lifestyle habits and positive emotions. You know, when we tend to move our bodies, we get that rush of endorphins and we feel better. And then we might end up, eating the salad that we packed for lunch instead of going and grabbing fast food or, anything like that. It just has this kind of upward spiral effect of positive change. So really just trying to boil it down to those foundational self-care behaviors. Like you have to fuel your mind and your body. You have to get the rest and recovery that you need through sleep and stress management. So those are really important factors that have been evidenced to help act as a protective factor to burnout. The next level of that, I would always encourage people to work with a professional, especially on some of those deeper rooted issues, because we might not realize how much of our history has contributed to the person that we are today and some of the patterns that we tend to repeat over time. So for a personal example, I'll share that actually my dad went to treatment for alcohol use disorder, and I took him to an inpatient facility. He got treatment. He's doing really well now. But for me, I didn't realize that watching him use alcohol to cope with his work stress was something that I inadvertently started doing in my adult life. Like as I was in college and as I got into my real job, and especially during COVID, lockdown was kind of that wake up call for everyone where it's like, this is a problem. These are my
bad habits coming out.
Yeah, exactly. But in those moments, that's what we know. That's what's familiar to us. And so that's what we use to cope. But it ultimately takes away from our well-being. So working with a professional, whether it is a coach, a counselor, a therapist, to help you recognize those patterns and to build the tools that you need and the skills that you need on a behavioral and psychological level to help you start making those positive changes.
Absolutely. Everything they were saying resonates so hard with me. I think therapy has been something that I have done for like the last 10 years on and off. And it's something that helps so much because to your point, you don't even really recognize the types of, behavior patterns that you're falling into, especially when things get stressful or, when it gets tense. So you are kind of going into you're chasing the dopamine rush and it wears off very quickly when you're not doing kind of those more sustainable practices.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did want to touch because you asked specifically about compassion fatigue too. So I know I was talking about burnout a lot, and those sometimes go hand in hand quite often, but they are different. And so compassion fatigue, you're in a caregiving field. So you're constantly giving this compassion, this empathy, this care to others. And typically, we have a hard time extending that same kind of care and compassion towards ourselves. So when we're going through a difficult time, we tend to have this kind of gritty attitude of like the suck it up buttercup mentality, or like, you should be tough enough to handle this. And we kind of beat ourselves down when we're already feeling low, which ends up making us feel worse. And then we end up turning to those coping patterns. So, it just kind of becomes this downward spiral. Right. So self-compassion is something that I always try to incorporate in whatever presentations I'm doing, because the more that we can treat ourselves with kindness, compassion, patience, respect, that's going to help us overcome some of those negative challenges that we face in life. Is when we can learn how to become our own cheerleader, our own coach, instead of our own biggest bully when we're facing hard times. that's going to help us transform our life. So it's really this mindset shift that has to happen, and also focusing on ways to grow your compassion satisfaction. So not always focusing on what went wrong, which is hard because our brains are hardwired for negativity.
To that, yeah.
And learning how you can kind of foster that satisfaction from the care that you give. Which is a lot easier said than done, but those are some of the ways. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I think one of the things that I hear so often in our industry, and it's because like our teams get so bonded with each other.
Yeah.
They kind of like, they become ride or die so
what you
fast.
Did there. They're bonded.
They're bonded. But they certainly kind of like create such tight bonds with each other where it does, like, if you have, you know, somebody on your team that is feeling kind of like the weight of all of this, and you're kind of seeing that maybe they aren't taking care of themselves in the ways that kind of like are helpful, it's been great to see a lot of our teams kind of go out of their way to kind of support each other in that, if it's just, you know, hey, like that was a tough case, go take 10 minutes and be able to kind of like take that time to be able to reset and go back into the day, when so often in other scenarios I've seen of like, especially like ER places where it's like, no, we got to kind of keep going through it because maybe there's no one else to cover you or things like that, when I feel like that kind of tightness is so key in working with each other. And I'm sure you see that a lot in the teams that you end up working with.
Oh yeah. Social support is a huge protective factor to compassion fatigue, to burnout, to even certain health conditions too.
Wow.
It's definitely important to have that group of people, whether it is in your workplace or even outside of your workplace, to be able to connect with and kind of share how you're feeling, what's going on, and to seek out that comfort and support if you're having a hard time giving it to yourself.
Yeah, 100%. Amazing. I think that like then as you kind of approach, I would love to hear kind of like as you approach this in like, because most of your coaching is team-based and kind of like you're talking obviously to like a group of clinics or a clinic at a time. How are you kind of like ensuring that, you know, that that team's taking it in, or that they are kind of like what sort of resources do you help kind of provide for them to be able to kind of like expand on their own outside of those sessions and outside of kind of the trainings that you're able to provide?
Yeah. So a lot of what I do is education around, you know, what is good for us and how do we do it, because as humans, we're funny creatures. We tend to get in our own way most of the time. So from a coach perspective, I never want to tell people like, this is what you need to do, because a lot of times they already know what it is.
Yeah.
So I kind of have this model that is based on like educate, empower, and engage. So we have to know what we need to do for ourselves. A lot of it is just refreshers. But then the coaching aspect comes into it, where in the empower section, you want to ask some really powerful questions to help people reflect on their personal journey or on their team as a whole. Like, what is the outcome? What are some of the things that you know are causing issues in the clinic, and how do you want to change those? And just start a brainstorming session. And then from there, engage. So that's where you start taking action. You set your goals, you come up with an action plan. So that's kind of how I bring the coaching model even into my presentations, because I never just want to come in and speak for an hour and then be like, all right, peace out, guys. Have a good life. Like, good luck with everything. So that is something that I always try to keep in mind, is providing even worksheets to go along. So that way, worksheets, recordings, things that they can reference back to, because I know a lot of the challenges that teams face too are, one, being able to get these things scheduled, two, getting their teams to engage when it's live, because either it's at work on a day off or after hours. And, you know, people want to kind of maintain some boundaries around that. And some people have more strict boundaries and other people don't. So really trying to get over some of those points of entry, like how can you have this in your well-being toolbox for your team to whip out as a reference whenever you have someone asking for, you know, like stress management resources. Oh, well, here was Melyssa's presentation on stress first aid. So one of the things that I'm excited about, though, is because I know that budgets are sometimes limited for hospitals, especially independently owned clinics. Again, the scheduling is a huge piece that's really difficult. Either clinics have to close for a certain time or do it on the weekend or something. And so I'm building out this educational hub that's membership based. So it's the Wellbeing Buddies. And that's part of my story too, is because the brand is inspired from my 13-year-old
your
dog.
logo.
No, everything. Buddy is the brand. He obviously was my heart dog. And that was another reason why I really wanted to help veterinary teams, because this was my first dog as an adult. Like, I didn't make the decisions for my childhood dog, and I wanted to make sure I was providing the best care. And I relied so heavily on his teams. So that was another just big contributor for why I wanted to bring this brand to life and help to support the people who are taking care of our pets. So yes, our logo is a digital outline of my hand and Buddy's paw. So he is forever embodied in the brand, and this is his legacy that I get to carry on. So through that, the Wellbeing Buddies membership is going to have a lot of the common presentations that I speak on broken down into an online course model. So that way there's like these mini lessons that people can tune into on their lunch breaks or something like that, or while they're walking, and then be able to kind of take that, and they get a little certificate when they complete a course. It's not race approved yet. You and I were talking, that's on the roadmap for the future. But yeah, it's just another way that I want to be able to have that continuing touch point for supporting teams in not just learning about these things, but actually implementing it in their lives and in their practices and their organizations.
Yeah. I mean, even just, again, like the accessibility to resources like that come in. It's so important, and you know, like missing, quite frankly, in a lot of our industry and space, and especially in a format like that, where kind of like going through, you know, modules or an online course to kind of like build upon everything as you continue to go through it. And I mean, I know I get, you know, requests from my teams asking of like, what are other things that we can use our like education funds for? If not, like kind of like, you know, I've already been to this dental forum, or like what else is there? And I think that the diversity in types of subjects like that, especially as it is, you know, something that a lot of team members at like, they're looking to kind of continue their longevity in the field. I think that that's the biggest thing is it kind of gets like this rap of, you know, the field is just like kind of chewing people up and spitting it out, when it's mainly that like it's just a resource thing. It's like it's folks really understanding, you know, what they can do. And I remember when I started school, our dean told us like the average lifespan of a nurse in the field because of everything was like 4 or 5 years. And I remember being like, I'm spending most of that time here. Right. And I know that metric has gotten longer, thankfully, but I think like again, that focus on like what teams can really do is going to help with that. It's going to help that make that number even longer to support the teams out. Yeah,
and obviously I love to, like, one of my company values is compassion, enjoyment, empowerment, and I really try to bring those into the presentations that I give and the courses that I'm building out, because like I know that things are really heavy on a lot of days that people are in the clinic. So you know, that was one of the things about Buddy's energy that I always loved, was he was a certified therapy dog, and when I would volunteer with him in the hospital, the human hospital, he would just bring smiles to people's faces when they saw him like walking down, and he was missing his lower canine, so his tongue was all hanging out the side, and it was just the cutest thing, and people loved it. So he was able to bring that sense of, you know, fun and enjoyment and smiles, and at the same time, he was also able to be there to comfort people when they were facing some of the most difficult times in their lives. And so just to be able to have that same kind of balance of energy incorporated in what I do, like I want to be able to make people laugh and smile, but I also don't want them to feel like I'm trying to minimize or diminish any of the tough stuff that happens too. Like I can also be there to hold space for that and to help give them some of the tools that they need to support themselves through that too.
Love it. I think that is, I think it, you know, it's that giving somebody the tools to be able to really take ownership of that and take control over that is something that is so needed and so admirable. So thank you for doing what you're doing, I think, for our field. As we kind of like start to wrap up here, I have one question that I think about, and I want to ask you of just like, what do you see as kind of the future of kind of like this kind of focus in veterinary medicine? I mean, like over the past, 3 or 4 years, as you've been kind of jumping onto this, and I'm sure you've seen, like we said in the beginning, a lot of organizations have been kind of changing their focus to ensure that this is kind of like highlighted for the teams. But what do you kind of see ahead of us in like the next couple of years?
Yeah, I definitely see this continued expansion of available resources. And that's something that, I admire a lot of people who have been in the space for a while as well. Rachel and Quincy of Get Motivated, Marie Holloway-Chuck, Dr. Sonia Olson, like all of those people. I think it's such an inspiration to see so many people helping to create these resources that have been missing for so long. So I definitely see continued expansion there. I love how technology is starting to evolve to be utilized to support operations within the clinic. So I think that could be something that helps to reduce a lot of the pain points of just the busy work that sometimes comes. I'm seeing a lot of support for, the practice owners that it's like, oh yeah, I want to open a vet clinic. Oh wait, now I have to operate a business and I wasn't taught how to do that, which I experience a lot I'm like, I want to help people. And then I'm like, oh right, I'm running a business too. Like there's that part. So I think that there's just this continued expansion and growth of those areas that have maybe been overlooked or maybe haven't been highlighted as important in the past, and then just continuing to evolve even the practice models themselves to better support the team members that are working in them. What that looks like, I'm not sure, but there's definitely the seeds have been planted and there's so many innovative communities out there. I got to be part of the LEAP Fellowship last year in France, and to hear the people that were in my cohort and to see past cohorts all working to help support vets and pets in the world was definitely something that gave me a lot of hope and inspiration.
Love that. I think, that's so exciting to see that there's, again, like more traction kind of being built up in this. And you make a great point about kind of like the tech innovations that have been coming out for the operations of the clinic. And I mean, we recently kind of in the past year have started an AI scribing system and like radiology support, things like that, to be able to really like enable our clinics. And we're at Bond, we're like kind of, we definitely are we want to jump on things and start to innovate and practice and try. And especially as the industry starts to kind of like push on those boundaries, we want to, make those tools available for our teams and kind of be the first to take those on. So it's really exciting to be able to see kind of the evolution of the support, because in human medicine, as I'm sure they have a ton of support. I mean, like the team that's built around kind of like an NMD is kind of extremely vast, the pillars of support that they have. And that is kind of like what we've always kind of modeled our support team structure around, is kind of like giving that support to our nurses and our doctors alike, to be able to have that, to take so much off their plate that we can be able to kind of move about the day and focus on the pets. I think that's always what's reminding us of like why we're here and what we're doing it as we're kind of providing care. I know when I'm able to run into clinics, that like it gives me that rush of like, yes, this is why I do what I do. And it's always so great to feel.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives people the time and the capability to do what they came into the field to do, and to be able to carry out their purpose and meaning behind their job, versus getting inundated with some of those extraneous tasks that just start to add up over time and really start to weigh on them if there's not that balance of being able to offload or delegate. And so, I just think it's incredible to see, especially on the Bond Vet perspective, just how you guys are taking that on and helping to change the game.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I I've loved having you in here, Melyssa. This has been so great.
Yes.
I feel your energy kind of like ruminating in the room. It's that or the AC's not working.
Right. I love it.
Any last plugs? I mean, you can find you at Veterinary Wellbeing Buddy. Is that just like name.com?
Yep. So veterinarywellbeingbuddy.com. I'm on Instagram at the same handle as well. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm over there and hang out a bit. And then if you want to check out the Wellbeing Buddies membership, it's just member.wellbeingbuddies.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melyssa. I, again, love having these types of topics because, again, they're so important, and I want to continue that conversation as we keep chugging along. That has been another episode of Bond Air. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will be checking in again soon, but Melyssa, thank you again so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Jesse. And to the listeners, take care, stay healthy, and be well, y'all.
All right, bye-bye.